Hello everyone, and welcome to the second lecture we're giving today on my father's birthday. Happy birthday, Daddy, again. So today we're going to speak. This is absolutely. I heard this is almost completely based on Rabbi Kessen's lecture, which he just gave this week. So I'm going to hopefully, if I remember, put the link in the description if you want to hear the original one. If you want to compare and contrast between our styles, the content's very similar. But we're going to speak about Peh Sach. Last time we spoke about the 10 plagues and different parallels and what's the whole idea of Peh Sach, sort of like revealing, getting rid of the impurities of which Egypt brought into the world, covering up the 10 sayings which God used to create the world. Now we're going to look at more of the overall picture. So we know that the Yom Tovim, the Jewish festivals, parallel spiritual reality, which when it comes down to the physical dimension, the dimension of time, maybe it can manifest itself in different ways. So we thought about the idea of Purim. We said every Purim, past or future, represents the idea of the victory of good over evil, and revealing that even the evil itself is powerless, things like that. Hanukkah is the light in the darkness. Rosh Hashanah is the idea of the beginning of creation, right? Right. So what's the idea of Pesach, right? So ideas of Pesach is the first of all the festivals. That's what we know, And Pesach is the idea when the Jewish people became a nation. That's the birth of the nation, the Pesach. Remember that the birth of the nation of the Jewish people is not just a localized celebration or event to the Jewish people. It represents the idea of the beginning of God's implementing his plan for mankind and the creation itself. Because the Jewish people, as we said, God doesn't do the perfection which he created the world for. He leaves it to us to do, right? That we've got a share. We create our own connection with God rather than being like robots that God's just giving to us, but we don't have any input in it. And like we spoke about in the Keystone lectures, the idea that God wants us to be like him. So therefore, if we are going to become infinite, it has to be through our own essence, and that's free will. Free will is connected with who we are. Right, just like the creation that God wants to achieve, finally, is the idea of giving infinite pleasure to something besides him, right? A creation, right? And that's coming from his undivided, indivisible sort of like oneness, because remember, God's not made of parts, so therefore it's coming from him himself. So therefore, our giving of the spiritual pleasure to our bodies and things like that have to come from us ourselves. So it can't be forced upon us. It has to come from us, and the only way you can do that is through free will. So that's the importance of the birth of the nation of the Jewish people, who are the main nation to actually carry out this perfecting of the world and bring the world to this ultimate pinnacle of communion and oneness with God. Okay, so that means that Pesach, being the first, if you remember the previous lecture, we spoke about the idea of the beginning of something, contains the whole. I mean, it's the kernel, it's the seed, which only later on we actually see how it's expressed in practice, but everything has to be contained in the keser, like we said, the crown, or the very first of the 10 Commandments, I am God, just the realization that God is reality, he's a source of reality, and the idea that the Bereshis, in the beginning, is the first thing God does to create the world, which means he's essentially showing us that there is a beginning to the world, and He's the one who starts it off, right? And then once you have a beginning, then everything can happen, can unfold. But everything is contained in that point of creation, that yesh mind, that ex nihilo point of beginning, right? So we can say the same thing for Pesach to an extent. That Pesach should contain within it the totality of God's plan. Because remember, everything which happens every year, the whole of existence is essentially 1 year. The next year is just repeating the same process, just on the next level down or next level up, however you want to look at it. That's why you got the cycle, the spiral of time, yeah, where all the different festivals, all the different dates, even mundane date, like whatever it happens to be, they all parallel each other and all have the same qualitative nature to them. It's just as time goes on, circumstances change, and I'm not going into the Kabbalistic side, but it's basically you're using the same pattern of the Sephiros, but on a different, within another Sephira or Paratzuf, technically. Like each year's got its own unique identity. All right, so leaving that aside, Pesach is the blueprint of the whole year, which means, in other words, the whole of creation. Right? The idea of the birth of the nation, the Jewish people being appointed or giving their task to create to bring the world to its perfection. So what exactly do we see in Pesach that tells us about this? Because we think about Pesach as a local thing, it's a big thing for the Jewish people, obviously. But how do we see its effect on the whole of creation? So what do we know about the myriad things about this very, very jam-packed festival? There's so much going on in it, right? We know, of course, we've got the Korbon Pesach, right? We've got a very, very unique aspect of Pesach, is that all the mitzvahs in Torah, all the commandments in Torah, they don't carry a punishment for not doing them, called kores. Kores means spiritually cut off from God. What that means, in this world they die early, or means in the next world they have to suffer a certain reality where they experience themselves cut off from God. Right? Usually there are many transgressions, like serving idolatry and eating on Yom Kippur, things like that. Half of them are different forms of immorality, like adultery and things like that. But they're all negative. God says, don't do this, don't do that. If you do this, then v'nichrasa, there will be kores, they'll be cut off. However, when it comes to God telling us to do proactively something, if we don't do it, it's obviously bad, but it doesn't create that sort of damage. It doesn't create that damage which can cause this severe punishment of kores, or consequence of kores, except for two examples. A person doesn't get circumcision, because that is the bond between us and God, which He gave that is a covenant given to Abraham for all his generations, his descendants. So we can understand why that's very serious, because you're just not partaking of the connection of the sanctification of the physical, if you want to put it like that. But that's a covenant. But why the Korbon Pesach? Why is the Korbon Pesach, if you do the Korbon Pesach, basically the Pascal lamb, in the time of the temple and the time of Egypt as well, on the 14th of Nissan, slaughter the lamb, right, and bring parts of it up as a sacrifice, but most of it the Jewish people have to eat. Now, if a person was able to do it and he didn't do it, then he's chayav kores. There seems there's something very, very fundamental and central to this festival, and specifically to the Korbon, to the sacrifice we bring on it. It's a very, very important one. Also, there's many, many, many commandments, or biblical and rabbinical, which we keep during Pesach. We have the 4 cups of wine, which we drink on the Seder night. And there's a 5th one, which is called the Kos Shel Eliyahu, the cup of Elijah, which we put sort of like symbolically on the table to tell him to come and bring the final redemption with the Messiah, because he's the one who ushers in the Messiah. Right? So that's the 5th cup of Elijah, which we've got accustomed to put on the table. But besides that, we've obviously got the 4 cups. We're going to see what that's all about. We've got to eat the Matzoh, the unleavened bread, the Maror, the bitter herbs, the prohibition of having Chometz, of having anything leavened. So tonight we're going to do Bedikas Chometz. We go around the house looking at all the nooks and crannies for any leaven, any pretzel or piece of bread which might have fallen down, and you get rid of all leaven from the house completely. Right? It's quite... to thank my wife, the public, and family for doing most of the hard work. For getting ready for Pesach. Unfortunately, I'm not very capable of doing all the back-breaking cleaning. That's not my thing, unfortunately. But maybe next year. Right? Hopefully, I'm giving people encouragement this way, anyway. Right? So the cleaning of the chometz, and obviously not eating chometz on Pesach, on Passover, which is kores itself. It's a very severe transgression. Then you've got the Korbon Pesach. We don't have a temple, but in the time of the temple, they had the Korbon Pesach, the Pascal lamb, which has got many, many laws connected with it. You can see them in chapter 11 or 12 in Exodus. We've got a whole chapter there which deals with the laws of the Korbon Pesach. Yep, just checked it out. It was chapter 12. And then you've got the commandment which we see in Deuteronomy chapter 6 about and also we see obviously in the same chapter in Exodus as well, the commandment to speak to your children and tell them about the going out of Egypt. And going so far that you're meant to speak about it the whole night non-stop, besides the Haggadah at the Seder night. The Seder means order, literally. We have an order which we do things, right? We follow a process throughout the night. Parts of it we actually do actions, eating the Matzoh and the Maror. Part of it we speak about the going out of Egypt. We sing praises to God and thanking Him for taking us out. So there's a whole thing which goes on then, and then and then you've got the idea of Pesach, right? Peh Sach, opening of the mouth, right? The word Pesach itself. What does it mean? Opening the mouth. We already alluded to some of the ideas in the previous lecture. We're going to maybe look at a different aspect of it today. Well, now, was today as well, right? But finally, the ultimate question is, what does the word Pesach actually mean? The word Pesach actually means to jump over. It means to skip or to pass over, literally, right? So the name of the sacrifice and the festival is called Pesach. Pesach means to pass over. Why? It's to commemorate God when He was killing the Egyptian firstborns. When it came to a house where there was a Jewish firstborn in the house, He skipped over and He didn't kill the Jewish firstborn. Right? It seems a bit tangential to name the whole festival just based on the fact that God jumped over, right? And so to speak, obviously, He skipped over, and definitely the actual Korbon, the sacrifice itself, the Korbon Pesach. I mean, maybe you could think of other names appropriate for it. The idea is that we take the idolatry of the Egyptians and we sacrifice to God. Maybe it should be the one of the festival of reclamation. We're reclaiming those aspects which the Egyptians, so to speak, took away from God, and we bring them back to God. Maybe that would be better. Okay. So going on this theme, that right. So there's a lot of questions there, and hopefully you see some beautiful ideas at the end. So to understand this key points, to understand that Pesach is the first of the festival, and it's the root of the whole process of reality, right? Like we said about Impurity, it corresponds to the beginning of the process, which contains everything in it. The idea of Sof Ma'aseh Machshava Techila, everything which is going to unfold in the end, is already there in the very first thought, the very first roots, and the very first primal desire to do something. Okay. So let's have a look. Where do we see the whole of the purpose of creation and the unfolding of creation in Pesach? So what is the purpose of creation? We've spoken about it many times, but we're going to frame it like this now. Yeah, practically what has to happen, right? Right, we have to fix a world which is broken. Now, there's two stages basic stages which caused that world to fracture. First of all is the creation itself. Part of that is God creating evil to give free will. So already that was a state of sort of danger and potential hiding of God's presence and power, because it's a potential that Adam might choose against God's will, and of course he did. That's the second stage where Adam brings the world down even further, and he actually brings evil into the world through his own volition now. So we have to fix those two things. But obviously, God brings the world down to here, and then Adam brings it to there. So to fix it, we've got to sort of do it in reverse order. So first of all, we've got to get rid of Adam's sin, whatever Adam's sin did. And then we've got the next stage, and unify that dimension with God. But it's more technical than that, as we're going to see. So what we're going to see today is that Pesach is actually the first attempt of actually fixing these two problems. Right? Amazing. Right? That we see in Pesach itself, right? And really in the Haggadah, this is what we're speaking about on a deeper level, right? It's a divine plan for mankind. And God actually revealed it to us on Pesach. And we're going to see ultimately in Shavuos, when he gave us the Torah as well, but it's all contained there in Pesach. We're going to see some beautiful ideas now. Only because we messed up at the last minute, some of the Jewish people served the golden calf, which is a lecture in itself. It's a very complex, very subtle mistake they made there, which is similar to the mistake that Adam made. But if it wasn't for that sin, they would have actually corrected the sin of Adam permanently, and would have started the process of the world to come, where the world actually starts to bask in God's presence and glory, however you want to put it, and have that pleasure, feel that infinite pleasure of God's infinite power and his totality. Right, so now we're going to break it down in an interesting way now. We're going to show that the world is separated into different dimensions. And when we say dimensions, we don't mean like a physical dimension, width and height and time. We're talking about, when I say dimension, it means sort of like a plane of reality, right? There's 7 different realities where each universe, let's call it, 7 universes. Each one's got its own laws, its own nature, its own reality. And we're obviously in one of those 7 now, the physical one, where we see the world of nature seeming to work as it does. We've got the idea of good and evil, right? And the struggle between good and evil, right? We're going to see that there's 7 levels, or 7 olamos Some of them you can't really call olamos, but we're going to explain it in detail now. And for those Kabbalists out there, I think it parallels the actual 5 olamos, the 5 worlds, as we call it, plus the extra 2 above, which we're going to mention as well, which we spoke about in the lecture about who or what is God. Okay, so what are these 7 dimensions? Okay, they span from the highest dimension, right, of possible reality, which is obviously something to do with God himself, and they come all the way down to the physical world, right? And this is a roadmap for God's plan that us human beings should contribute to reaching the highest level we can, right? And the way to do this is by transforming and unifying a lower dimension with the one above it. Then once they're unified, you unify them with the level above, then the level above, then the level above. Eventually, you get that whole of creation and all the thing which was at first seemingly separate from God. We reunite it and we show that everything comes from God and everything is just an expression of God's will. And remember, God's will, keser, the will, right? That's the one. That's how we perceive the oneness of God, is by God's will, because we can't perceive God himself. So what we could do is we could perceive the deepest thing we know about God, which is his will, or you could say his existence, but then you have to go back to the Keystone lecture about what existence really is. We'll speak about it now maybe as well, just so it's get things in context, because we do need to understand the top 2 levels. So that's the idea, sort of like the levels, the dimensions collapse on each other until they're all transformed, and levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all become one, and they all become sort of connected with levels 6 and 7. Okay, so we're going to explain what these dimensions are now. The first 4 we can understand, to a greater or lesser extent. They make sense to us. We can make some sort of comprehension of it. The 5th one is something which is completely beyond us. We refer to as Olam Haba, the world to come. This is the final destination of mankind. Okay, and that state, that reality, continues forever. But because there's like an asymptote graph, you can constantly get closer and closer to the x-axis. Yeah, but it never actually touches. So it's an everlasting journey of more infinite pleasure, and then the next moment it's even more infinite compared to the one before. So it's mind-boggling ideas which we just can't comprehend at all with our puny sort of limited minds. But it's very good. That's the main thing. Okay? Right. Now, the first 4 levels are ones which are connected with our reality, which we're familiar with, whether it's a physical reality or even with a spiritual reality, even involving things to do with God's names to an extent as well. These are things which we can perceive, which God's revealed to us for the sake of us being able to perfect the world. But there's a reality which is even beyond that, right? So this is the idea of tikkun, the idea of rectification or fixing or bring the world to its perfected state. Okay. And of course it has to be done by mankind. That's essential. It has to be done through us. That's the idea of midas hadin, the idea of justice, the idea of we only get what we do, right? Like the analogy to the worker who builds a piano and the reward is the piano, right? So the work we do is bringing God into reality and recognizing God's reality. The reward is that very same thing, that we experience God's reality, right? Which is the highest form of pleasure possible by definition. And the way we do that is by listening to God and fulfilling his commandments and his will. Okay, so essentially, if you want to sum up the 4 elements of the Tikkun process, which sums up basically the whole of Judaism, that's what it's all about, essentially. You've got the 5 realities, them being transformed and unified, the lower with the one above, until they all become one. This has to be done using free will, and by obviously listening to God by doing the commandments. Okay, so we have to see all of that in Pesach. Okay, that's the point here. All these transformations we're going to see happen in Pesach, right? Not only do we understand, we see the theoretical idea of the transformations, we actually experience these transformations. That's a mind-boggling thing about Pesach. At the time in Egypt and eventually at Sinai, we experienced any one of these transition stages. That's why it's called Pesach, Passover, because it also is the idea that God helps us pass over from one level to the other, as we know in especially in the Kabbalistic works, is that on Pesach, even now on Seder night, the Arizal, the great Kabbalist Arizal, lived 500 years ago, Rav Yitzchak Luria, he explains that on the night of Pesach, usually on any other festival, we work bit by bit. We sanctify the day a bit more. We start reaching high levels very slowly. On Pesach, it all happens in one go. And if you're familiar with the Kabbalah, it's extraordinary. It's astounding how much we think, wow, you have to work. And then you can get to that level and that level on some of the other festivals. And oh, wow, on this festival, you even get to this level. On Pesach, it's just boom, straight away. And it's done without our effort. Interesting. It's just done, kind of given to us. Very interesting, that. But that's the idea of Pesach. It's the idea of passing over. It's the idea of jumping, skipping, right? You're skipping over from one level to the other. Okay, so let's get into specifics now and look at these 7 dimensions, and then we'll see how they apply in the laws of Pesach and the concept of Pesach. So we have, first of all, we've got the highest level, so to speak, which is God himself. But that's God's unfathomable self, right? He creates everything, right? So therefore, even concepts. So therefore, there's no concept which you can apply to God. So God is a concept. So to say that's God's realm, you're using words. So you're automatically missing the point. It's something which is beyond our ability to even describe anything. That's the highest level. That's the best we can do to describe that, is his unfathomable self, or his essence, right? Because and on that level, nothing exists besides God, right? And that is the truth of reality, because that never changes. That's key here, right? That never changes because God doesn't change. So the God before the world was created and God afterwards was created has not changed. So what does happen when we create it? That's very hard to understand. But what we do understand is that thing behind the curtain has revealed to us a desire to connect with us, whatever that means. But that's what we speak about in the first Keystone Action, this whole channel, basically. Right. So on that level, we're talking about just the existence of God himself. But you could ask a question, yeah? Take it a bit further, think a bit deeper now, right? To say that's God's existence, that means, that implies there's something besides God. You've got God and the concept of existence. So again, so therefore, even this is mind bending, this, right? Even the concept of existence is a creation. Okay? So, yes, you're getting the picture. You're starting to understand what God really is now, in as much as we can't even start to even attempt. I mean, it's ridiculous how some people think, oh, God's made up of different parts of that. What, you know anything about God? In Judaism, we're struggling just to understand how God reveals himself. But to speak about God himself, that's futile, right? It's completely very unfortunate, right? Anyway, so it's so far away from reality, right? So God creates all concepts, including the concept of existence, according to God, the concept of essence, the concept of oneness, the concept of God, right? The concept of something unknown, even the concept of something which is intrinsically unknowable. That's a concept. So you're stuck. When you're trying to access the first dimension, you're just completely stuck. No access to that level at all, right? Why is it important to know that? Because we have to realize that at the end of the day, there is a being which is unchanging, right? Which is absolute, right? Very important to know that. Okay. The second level is what we call Ein Sof. So when we speak in Kabbalah and in Jewish philosophy, when we speak about God in more slightly more positive terms, more affirmative terms, then we're speaking about more the Ein Sof. But even the Ein Sof is just no end. Ein means no, Sof means end. So this dimension is basically the dimension where there's no limit to God, and on that level, God's existence is unchanging. Now we can speak about God's unchanging, above any change, above any definition, right? And you can even say that it's above concept on that level, maybe, right? Because you're not even saying anything positive about that level. You're just saying it's beyond, right? But that means something's beyond. Basically, you're not actually saying anything affirmative about that level. On that level, again, that's God's revealing his essence, but again, it's not the essence itself, it's the revelation of the essence. That's called Ein Sof, right? Always remember, revelation is not the same as the thing itself. We've spoken about this many times. It's like the light waves coming off a person's face, where you're looking at the person, but you're not. You're looking at the light waves, right? You can never see a person directly, right? Seeing is always through a conduit, through light. But light reflects somehow the person. You recognize the person through the light rays coming off them. So that's called Ein Sof. Right. Now that is all. Those two dimensions are basically, we could call God, just for convenience. Then level number 3 is the first of the 5 sort of dimensions which are outside of the equation. You've got something called Zulosoi. So the first thing God does, he creates something which is an other, right? Something which is besides God, right? Remember the Ein Sof, which is level number 2, even that is unchanging. It's a totality of reality. There's nothing besides God on that level. Then there's a stage where God creates another reality, a created reality, called Zulosoi, something which is besides God. Okay? That ultimately is the whole of creation, especially mankind, and that is where the world to come is. That is the level. That's the level where it's just the whole of mankind is becoming one, so to speak, and that second being besides God gradually gets unified with God and becomes and benefits from the pleasure of being close and similar to God. Okay. Then you have the 4th level, which is the second of the 5, let's call it, which is called the spiritual, Ruchni. That's a spiritual level, that's to do with spiritual realities. Won't go into that too much. Then you've got the 5th level is physical, called Geshem, right? And then the 6th level is something, so that now we're talking about, that's all the until we get to us. Right? Human beings, that's in the 5th level, that's called physical. And we see that's where Adam was originally. Then, remember, there has to be a challenge. There has to be us here. There has to be a pull to spirituality on one hand, choosing good, but there also has to be a pull in the negative direction for free will purposes. And that is called the world of evil, or the world of Zohama. Zohama means impurity. Impurity is a good word, I guess. Spiritual impurity. That's the world of the Satan, Satan. That's where, in that dimension, you have certain types of angels, which are negative angels, which are Malachei Chavola, they're called avenging angel or damaging angels, right? That's the world of temptation. That's the reality which has the power to draw a person in away from God. Whereas the spiritual is this a place of maybe the angels, you say maybe exactly what's in that dimension. I'm not 100% sure where you draw the line. It could be it's the idea of God's names, right? And then below that you've got the angels and things like that, all the spiritual things, all the positive influences on the world. And we're stuck in the middle in the physical, right? And then you've got the 2 levels, 1 and 2 are the 2 dimensions of God. And then you've got the other 5. So number 3 is Zulosoi. God creates something other than him, right? And that's just such a generic totality of everything in creation. That's a final resting point of creation. But then you break it down into specific. Then you've got the spiritual realm with all the positive forces. Then you've got the physical, the place where we have the free will and we have to choose to go after the spiritual, or to go to the 6th level, which is the place of the world of Zohama. Then you've got a 7th one, which we understand after the lecture of Sin of Adam. It's the dimension which Adam himself created, right? Which is the idea of the physical, which is neutral in itself, but being merged and sort of melded together with the Zohama. That's the idea of evil and the physical, our reality down here, being very intimately intertwined with evil. Okay, and with the Zohama. That's the idea of us having the evil inclination in ourselves. Our instinct is to do bad, right? And we have to break out of that to choose good proactively now. It's much harder. Okay, so those are the 7 levels, right? And we have to transform these levels one after the other. Remember, like we said in that lecture about Adam's sin, Adam's plan was to create this new dimension in order that he can do an extra transformation and sanctification of God's name by taking an even lower world and revealing God in it, which means, how do you reveal God in the world? By fulfilling God's commandments, right? Or if a person doesn't do the mitzvahs, the commandments, he could do repentance, or ultimately through suffering. Those are 3 ways a person can achieve bringing God into the dimension and perfecting the dimension, that we explained many times. Okay, so these tools are the ones which you transform one dimension to the other. So our job now is to take the world where good and evil is so confusing and to make clarity, separate good and evil, understand what truth is and lies. Some religions, the classic example, some religions look very convincing, they've got a lot to them, but when you look at them you see cracks in them, right? There's something not quite consistent. It looks man-made at the end of the day, right? Why didn't God reveal himself openly to that religion like he did with Judaism? So there's ways of telling what the correct message of God is in the world, right? So that is a process of birur, of purification. When a person's got a certain vice, right? This is not on the philosophical level, it's on the practical level. A person's got a desire for eating cheeseburgers, let's say. Well, cheeseburgers are not kosher, by the way, because they involve meat and milk together, which we're not allowed to have cooked together. Even cold, rabbinically, we can't have them together. But he wants to have them. But no, it's not me who wants it, it's my evil inclination who wants it. I want to do God's will. So when a person works on himself and clarifies it, eventually he resists the temptation to have the cheeseburger, and eventually he eliminates the desire to even have it. All he wants is to do God's will, and that desire to do evil, he's purged from himself, and that's a purification of the seventh dimension, where good and evil, or the physical realm, is mixed together with evil. You're separating the evil out from the physical. Now you're left with a neutral state, and now you're beginning to connect it with the spiritual state by actually connecting with God much deeper. Okay. Right. Now, Pesach. On Pesach, we actually experience all these changes. The change from level 7 to 6 to 5 to 4 to 3. Where do we see this? Right? So, we spoke about Adam, right? The idea of avodah, right? Remember we said that Pesach has to encapsulate the whole of mankind, right? The whole process of the tikkun. Remember, it has to happen through our free will and through us choosing to do the right thing. Or it can also happen by doing the wrong thing in repentance or suffering. So Adam was told, don't eat from the tree. He was level 5. He had the snake there for the temptation. That's level 6. Right? He said, oh, eat from the tree, you'll be like God, which was true to an extent, because Adam, like we said in the second Adam sin lecture, Rashi's approach, that he would be a creator of a new world just like God, the seventh world. Now you understand a bit more detail what we're talking about there. Right? Because he knows, I've got to be similar to God. Just like God created new worlds, I have to create good new worlds as well. What's the only new world I can create? A world where good and evil are intertwined. So what he's done is he has done a transformation, Adam's done a transformation of the worlds, but not the physical to the one above. He's transformed the world to the one below. So he's gone further away from the purpose, right? Like we said, now we've got two things to fix. We've got to fix the sin of Adam, bring level 7 and 6 up to the level 5. Then we start working on level 5 and bring it to level 4, the physical to the spiritual, like Adam was meant to, and eventually we'll get to the level of the world to come, which is level 3. Okay. So you see the idea of the free will there, okay? Right. So now, when do we actually achieve the rectification of the sin of Adam? Where you get the physical without the influence of the Satan, of the forces of evil. That's only going to happen starting with the Messianic era. When Mashiach comes, we start to finally purge the evil out of ourselves completely. And eventually we go through the process of death and resurrection. The death is a final hammer blow to the evil which was inside of us. Once we die, that's the punishment of the body for eating from the tree of knowledge, right? Because we're all carrying on that zuhama, that impurity which is inside us. That can only be completely purged through death ultimately. So we die, the righteous die and they come back to life straight away. Other people might die and take longer, right? And eventually, so after that happens, there's no more death, because there's no more impurity in who we are. So all we can do now is just go into the spiritual realm and eventually to the world to come. Okay, that's the roadmap. So we know that now, after the sin of Adam, we have originally we had the 7 Noahide laws. That's the 7 laws which all mankind was commanded, and we call them the Noachide laws because of Noach was the father of all mankind, because he's the sole survivor, him and his family, from the Great Flood, 10 generations after Adam. So you could call it the Adamite laws, because essentially the commandments were given to Adam, I think, all of them, the Talmud says. But Noach, being the father of all mankind, Noah, we say that these are the commandments of all mankind. So we call them B'nai Noach, the children of Noach, which means basically mankind. So he had 7 commandments. And if mankind would have succeeded, they would have gone back to the 5th level. However, again, more failure. So Adam failed. The 10 generations from Adam to Noach failed. There had to be a flood. God said, all right, I'll give you another chance. Another 10 generations. They still failed. Until Abraham came along, Abraham. So there God said, okay, I've given enough chances to the whole of mankind. Right? They use their free will to reject it. Now I have to pick a specific person who I know is going to be capable of completing it. A totally righteous person, that's Abraham. And the job will now be given to him, and his, because of his purity, his descendants will also inherit some of that spiritual goodness, right? So you can be sure that by the end, his descendants will also have completed the job, right? And that's the Jewish people. Yeah, it's not looking amazing at the moment, but yeah, we're still going strong in terms of the Jewish people as a whole. Many people, unfortunately, failing, but that's all part of it, all part of the free will process, right? At the end of the day, we've stayed loyal for thousands of years. So you can see that that seed of Abraham and Yitzchak, Isaac and Jacob are still very strong in the Jewish people. The fact that we're still going after all these millennium. Okay. Right, and then eventually you have Abraham, Isaac, then Jacob. Jacob had the 12 tribes, 12 Shavatim, and those are his 12 sons, essentially. And then you have the 70 souls which descended. That includes his grandchildren, some great-grandchildren. They descended into Egypt. The 70 eventually they became 600,000. So you see the growth of the Jewish people from Abraham till Isaac, Jacob, then the 12 tribes. Then the next 3 generations, more or less, expanded rapidly into a massive nation of 600,000. And then we were slaves in Egypt. Right. So what's going on now? So now Abraham and his descendants, i.e. the Jewish people, have got to get rid of this level 7, transform it back to level 5, basically. So Egypt were the epitome of these lower 3 levels. Right? We know that the rabbis say that the Egypt was the 49th level of tumah, of impurity. There's certain levels of purity and impurity. It goes up to number 49, right? Number 50, we spoke about in Purim, about Haman wanted to reach the 50th level, which is totally cutting God out the picture at the root. He wasn't able to do that because that's impossible. Because essentially, that once you go to the 50th level, you transcend nature and evil can't exist there. Then you're already gone into the spiritual realm and then you're finished then. Okay? So the Egyptians are the 49th level of Tumah. That's the idea of the Zohar. That's level 6. Yeah, maybe level 7, but level 6, the idea of personifying evil. Okay? Also, they were masters at witchcraft. What's witchcraft? Witchcraft is the idea of manipulating nature using impure forces. So that's kind of a hybrid between the Zohar, the evil, but how it interacts with the physical. Okay? So that's level 7, the idea that evil and physicality are bound together. Another aspect of evil is they were awash with immorality. Yeah, they're promiscuous people. Now this, surprisingly, is not evil, right, in itself, because the drive for immorality is essentially neutral or a good thing. It's the drive for procreation, to produce life. It's a good thing, essentially, right? But it can be used for bad as well. So therefore, it's this limbo stage where it can be used for good, it can be used for bad. That's the idea of physicality, essentially, right? And the Egyptians, they personified this drive. And obviously, they themselves practically went after it in a negative way. But you see, in Egypt, you have these three levels. You've got the idea of the blending of spirit, of impurity with physicality. That's level 7. Level 6, they personified evil itself. Like we spoke about Paro being the Oref, leaching from the backside of the higher spiritual worlds in a negative way, right? Just like the Satan does, he leeches off the holiness and he brings it over to the dark side, you could say. The 49 levels of tumah, impurity. And that's level 6. And level 5 is the physicality we receive through their drive for immorality. Now, the 10, right, so this is the whole process of God setting the necessary conditions to reach the final purpose, the final destination of mankind. First of all, God create a world, create something besides him, then create the spiritual and physical world, give them a test. So obviously it has to be a temptation, the 6th world of Zulosoi. And we see man failed and strengthened the evil so much so until even the ones who now have the job to fight against the evil, they're stuck in Egypt, is the most impure of all the exiles. Yeah, it's the father of the exiles, the exile in Egypt. So the other 4, which we spoke about in a lecture about the 4 exiles, the 4 souls of the Jewish people, about Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Edom, which is Esau of Christianity. That's the one which lasts 2,000 years. So those 4 exiles are basically just expressions of the core evil, which is Egypt, Mitzrayim, right? The name Mitzrayim itself means constriction. Yeah, it means stopping people expanding and growing. Yeah, it's stopping people jumping, if you want to put it like that. You can't jump if there's a ceiling right above your head, right? Once it's free, you can jump up, you can reach the next level. So they were in a situation where they were completely subjugated to the forces of evil in a big way. And the 10 Makkahs that we explained in the previous lecture were revelations. That was the freeing of the Jewish people from the binds of Egypt, yeah, by revealing the truth of reality, right? Revealing the truth of reality, which is that God is the source of all the forces in the universe, right? The 10 sayings, and they were revealed by the 10 plagues, and essentially revealing the 10 sephiros, those 10 ways that God chooses to reveal himself to mankind, right? So that he was revealing what lies behind the physical, the spiritual reality, the 10 sephiros, right? Right, and you can see that this achieved a certain transformation. You have the world of good and evil together, or physical and evil together, the world of evil, the world of physicality, and those were represented by Egypt, and they were destroyed by the 10 plagues. Now everything starts being unified with the true reality, which is level 4, or level 2 out of the lower 5, which is the world of spirituality, Ruchni. We started getting elevated, we jumped to the spiritual level, right? And we started to experience the reality of the angels or God's revelation directly, yeah? that was what happened at the night of the smiting of the firstborn. Right? In fact, we if you want to hear an allusion to this, a very nice one for those who speak Hebrew, God tells Moses that Oid nega echad avi Mitzrayim parav Mitzrayim. I've got one more affliction. This is after the darkness, right? Right? God says to Moses, I've got one more affliction which I'm going to bring on Egypt, right? And that's going to be the killing of the firstborn. Now, if you look at the word, oid means more, nega means an affliction, and echad one. So you can read it, oid nega echad, there's one more affliction I have to bring, but you can also read it, oid nega, there's one more affliction for the Mitzrayim. What is the name of that one? Oid nega echad, one, because I'm going to reveal my oneness. Remember, that's Keser, the highest of the 10 spheres. I'm going to reveal my oneness, because remember, at the level of Keser, everything's one. It's only after Keser, the other 9 spheres, we start breaking that primal desire of giving and being good to another. It gets broken into parts, where there you get plurality within the different midas, the different characteristics. However, the spheres. On the level of Keser, everything's one. So Oid Nega Echod, right? That nega, I've got another nega, and that's a nega of Echod, of oneness, which I'm going to bring on the Egyptians. I'm going to reveal my oneness, as we said last time, that God himself went through Egypt, whatever that means. Some revelation of the Keser, right? It means when you speak about God himself doing it, you're talking about God revealing himself through that highest of the 10 lenses which he uses to reveal, which is the one which is closest, our closest understanding of what God is himself. Of course, God himself is way beyond that, as we explained, the first and the second levels. But down here, when we talk about God revealing, we talk about the spiritual dimension revealing itself down in the physical. And the highest part of that is Keter. And this carried on in a big way. So we've got the revelation of the 4th level now, right? Right? And now the 7th, 6th, and 5th level are now nullified in face of the 4th level. So we see that this physical world, all the evil and all the confusion, is all God. God's completely in charge the whole time, right? So now the lowest three dimensions get transformed into the 4th one. Right? Right? Okay, so now you've got 4 levels which are all in the Jewish people's consciousness. They're all the same thing, essentially. Right? There isn't any separate physical or evil or mixture of evil. It's all God's will. Right? It's all the 4th level, the spiritual reality. But that continued throughout the next 49 days. Right? The 49 days leading to the giving of the Torah at Sinai. At the Yom Suf, the splitting of the Red Sea, which happened 6 days later, on the 7th day of Passover, of Pesach, they experience prophecy. Prophecy is you accessing the spiritual realm. Right? And it says even a maidservant at the sea experienced a high level of prophecy than Yechezkel, Ezekiel, and we know what he experienced, the Masa Merkava. That was mind-boggling. The beginning of the book of Ezekiel, the first 2 chapters, the very vivid depiction of the sort of vision he had, very, very detailed there, about different angels, the throne of glory, etc. Right? The way the angels worked, right? And all sorts of other stuff there. That was less than what even the most basic person, a maidservant, right? That's what I'd say there. The deeper meaning is what maidservant's referring to there, probably. But it's just emphasizing the idea that Jewish people had a very, very high level of prophecy as a nation there, right? And this transformation, and this is because you're going through a transformation now, right? You've already transformed the lower three levels into the fourth level. Now you're working on getting all those levels to the third level, which is the world to come, right? That's the experience of the actual experience of the total oneness of God, right? And that's happened for 49 days between Pesach and Shavuos. So remember, we spoke about the number 49 before, the 49 levels of impurity. We're going to transform those 49 levels into the 49 levels of spirituality now. Okay? So that's again, we're transforming a low level to a high level, right? And eventually when we get to Sinai, then we go beyond 49, we go into 50, and that transcends. And that's where God rips open the heavens and the higher firmaments, the lower firmaments, and the Jewish people got an awareness. They saw, seeing, maybe not the best way to say it, but they saw reality. They saw the sounds. That means they were able to see things which cannot normally be seen. They saw the reality that there's nothing except God, and of course they didn't see anything physical, as it says in Deuteronomy chapter 4. Right? Despite this amazing vision they had, they didn't see any physical manifestation of God. Because God's beyond that. They saw something which is called yediyah, knowledge. They saw knowledge. They experienced the reality of existence. That is, ultimately, there's nothing else besides God. They experienced it. That is Olam Haba. That is the third level. That is the world to come. That's where you experience that there's an us, but paradoxically, there's nothing but God at the same time. And they experience that. The only time in history that's ever happened, that's at Sinai, right? It's even higher than the revelation they had at Passover, at Peh Sach. Okay? Okay, so you're seeing the pattern here. This actually happened. It's not just a theoretical, they were shown the idea. They literally experienced it. On the night of the smiting of the firstborn, they experienced God going through Egypt and directly interacting with the world. The highest part of the spiritual dimension, they got shot up there, right? Springboarded there, right? Then the next 49 days they gradually built in and incorporated and internalized these ideas and this reality, and they purified themselves through the 49 days of purification of the Omer, right? We had a whole lecture about the three-stage festival, right? Peh Sach, the Omer, and Shavuos. Then finally get to Shavuos, where you started to transform the lower four levels now into that sort of that destination level of Olam Haba, the Zulosoi, where we reach a level where we are just one entity opposite God. And that's the idea. The Jewish people were called in the singular, right? Vayichan Shom Yisrael neged hara, and Israel dwelled, and Vayichan is the singular. It doesn't mean they dwelled, it means he dwelled literally opposite the mountain, because the Jewish people were totally unified at that point. So they were actually experiencing, and when the Torah was given, when the 10 Commandments were spoken by God, they actually experienced the totality of God's omnipotence, omnipresence, omni-everything is. And right, okay, whatever the word for that would be. Okay. Right, okay, so we see that Pesach really is the process of the whole of creation. Going from the placing of the test, that means they go down to Egypt, they sink into the levels of impurity, right? And then is an extension of the, I didn't mention this, but there was a connection, a deep connection between the Jews in Egypt and the sin of Adam, which we're not getting into now. That's different topic as well, but for those who are familiar with the writings of the Arizal, you'll be very familiar with that. He starts off with the introduction to the Passover. He starts off speaking about the sin of Adam, so you can see the deep connection there, right? And then the idea of the Jewish people coming out, right? The idea of transcending, the wiping away of all the evil which the Egyptians created through their 10 false sources of reality, and they were wiped away by the 10 plagues, which then reveal the 10 true sources of reality, and then that goes into the higher level, the 10 commandments, where we go right to the source. We see what lies behind all the 10. And now we understand why it's Passover, because you're passing from one level to the other. Okay? Right. So now let's have a look at where do we see this in the commandments of Pesach and all the other things. Okay. So first of all, we spoke about there's 4 cups. The 4 cups correspond to the 4 verses in I think Exodus chapter 6, beginning of Parshas Va'era, where God says 4 different languages of his promise to redeem the Jewish people. I will bring you out from under the hardship, the load, or the yoke of Egypt. And I will save you from their work completely. And I will redeem you. And I will take you to myself. 4 stages. Verse 3 are saving us from Egypt. There's 3 negative aspects of Egypt: the mixture of physicality and evil, the impurity of Egypt, and the physicality of Egypt. I will take you out of all those 3. See, that's the hidden message there. It's beautiful. And the fourth term of salvation, corresponding to the 4th cup, is Velokachti, and I will take you. So it's not a matter of anymore just saving us from the impurity and the physicality. He's elevating us and taking us up to the 4th level, right? But there's a 5th word, right? Vehevesia, and I'll bring you, right? I will not just redeem you, and I'll bring you to me. Come to me. That's the 5th level, going upwards, right? Or the second, the highest of the 5 levels, which is now dimension, right? That's the world to come. God's saying, come to me, come. I will bring you to me, right? I'll bring you to the land representing Olam Haba, the world to come, right? Which is called the land of the living, right? Beautiful. And why the Kos Shel Eliyahu? What's this 5th cup? The 5th cup, and remember, wine, I just realized this now. What is wine? We spoke about this. We spoke about this in Purim quite a lot. Wine is the drink which is always used when you're transitioning from one stage to another, right? You want to go from one state to a different state, use wine. You bring in the Sabbath, bring in Shabbos. You make the blessing on the wine. You bring the Sabbath out. You're going from a holy dimension to a mundane dimension. You're going from Shabbos, Saturday, to Sunday now. So you make a blessing, Havdalah, of separation. God, who separates between the holy and the mundane, right? Marriage, make a blessing on the wine, right? Because you're going from one state of existence as a separate individual, a selfish being, to one which can be capable of giving now to the spouse, right? So wine is always nichnasein, that's also by the sin of Adam. We spoke about this quite a lot in the second lecture there, about the wine. According to one opinion, it was a grapevine, the tree of knowledge, right? Because that's the idea of connecting the spiritual to the physical. You bring the spiritual, in Adam's case, you bring the spiritual down to the physical, right? That's a conduit. You open it, it's a bridge. That's what wine is, yeah. So you've got the 4 cups, and you've got this 5th one, which is a cup of Elijah. Why a cup of Elijah? Amazing idea here, right? Lots of ideas. Because this represents the highest level of mankind, which is Olam Haba, the world to come, the final destination of mankind. And Eliyahu Novi is the one who brings in Mashiach. He's the one who ushers in Mashiach. He says he's meant to come a day before Mashiach comes and announce Mashiach's coming tomorrow. That's how it's meant to happen. So Eliyahu represents the concept of bringing the world to its ultimate perfection, which is started by the Messianic era. The Messianic era is the beginning of the process of Olam Haba, the world to come. Okay? In fact, it's very interesting that Eliyahu Hanavi himself, Elijah the prophet, he personified this in his own life. Because what happened at the end of Elijah's life? He just went up to the world to come alive. He literally transformed his physical being into the world to come. So what better person to bring in the world to come for the rest of us is someone who's already achieved it. Yeah, he's one of the very few people who never died. And in fact, they say that Arizal says that Elijah was a Gilgal, a reincarnation of Adam himself. Remember we spoke about what happened when Adam sinned. His souls left the body, the three higher souls. Elijah was that highest soul. So that soul which just left Adam, it came back into this world in the form of Elijah. Right? Remember the fifth highest of the five souls? Fifth, again. That means that's the access that Adam had to God's, to knowing that there's nothing besides God. That is the top of, that's the highest of the five dimensions, which we're talking about now. Elijah had that access and he had that soul. So the cup of Elijah, it's beautiful. The cup of Elijah we don't drink it, maybe because we're not on that level yet. We leave it for him, right? But it's sort of like as a foreshadowing of what's going to happen. We leave that cup of Elijah on the table for him to drink, so to speak. That's the custom goes, but the deep ideas behind it are astonishing. Just I can't take it sometimes. Let's just move on. Right? Please leave in the comments if you get the ideas first time round, and I'm just repeating it 2 or 3 times extra for no reason. But I think sometimes I feel that maybe you're just missing this point, which is actually a bit deeper than what I'm saying. So that's why I repeat things a lot. Now, speaking one-to-one with people, I wouldn't be so long-winded because I'll see their reaction. But unfortunately, you don't have that luxury when recording by myself. All right, so those are the 4 cups. Then what else do we have on Pesach? We have the Matzoh and the Maror, the unleavened bread, and the Maror, the bitter herbs, which we have to eat, and the prohibition of Chometz. Okay, so let's start with Chometz. What is Chometz? Chometz is leavened bread basically, which is made out of flour, water, but there's yeast as well. So we have 3 elements which we've got to stay away from on Pesach, right? So we've got the combination, we've got flour is physicality, water spirituality, but then you mix it with a bit of the zoyama, yeast is always a reference to the soton, yeah? We call the evil inclination, we call it the so'or shab'is, it's called the yeast in the dough. Like we're the dough, but we've got a bit of yeast making us, puffing us up, making us arrogant, or making us, feel ourselves a bit too much than we should, right? That's a yeast in the dough. So the Kabbalah refers to specific types of impurity, Chometz and so'or. Chometz is leavened bread, and so'or is yeast. They've both got their own characteristics. One causes other things to rise, that's the yeast, and leaven is the thing which has risen as a result of the yeast acting upon it. But anyway, either way, Chometz or leaven is a combination of flour and water. That's physicality and spirituality. Water is the idea of spirituality, is the idea of oneness, yeah, the idea of oneness with God. That's the idea of the water makes things come together, right? It also refers to immorality as well, because it's a negative aspect of water where you become one with another person who you shouldn't be one with, right? Or one with the food which you're sort of being drawn after. But either way, the idea of physicality, spirituality, but with the yeast involved, that's a seventh level. That's the lowest of the 7 dimensions. That's the dimension of the reality where there is evil intrinsically intertwined with good, right? And we're trying to get out of Egypt on Pesach. The whole point of Pesach is we're trying to elevate ourselves from that level and to connect to the spiritual level. We can't recognize the reality of something like that, right? Something where the impurity is still mixed in. So therefore, it's very serious to eat Chometz on Pesach. Because what you're essentially doing, the time when we are literally experiencing the world to come, you're bringing evil with it. And that you can't have, right? When I say literally, I mean that's what's happening in the spirituality. We might not feel it the same way as we felt on the going out of Egypt originally, but that's really what's going on the night of Pesach, on the Seder. The night of the Seder. Okay, so what do we have instead? We have matzah. Matzah, that's okay. That's flour, water, but no yeast. We got rid of the yeast, the time, the element of time. I think we gave a lecture maybe last year about Pesach. Maybe we explained that's the idea, or maybe Shavuos it was. Oh no, is that lecture where we speak about the 3-part festival? Yeah, we spoke about the idea of time being involved. Time is a physical thing, right? It's the idea of change, whereas the spiritual dimension, there isn't change as such, right? It transcends time to an extent. It's got its own time there, but it's not our time, which we experience in the physical world. So the idea of the matzah and it's flour and water, but no yeast, no time involved, right? So we meant to eat that. Then we have the Maror. The Maror is the bitterness, right? As the bitterness of the suffering in Egypt, to remind us of the bitter work in slavery. But also, it's a bitterness, it represents a Zomar. That's level 6, right? Because we have to take all the negative energies, right? And elevate them. So we take the Zomar itself and elevate it, right? How do we elevate it? We've got to separate it from the positive first. Okay. Interesting. So we see references exactly technically why we do eat Maror, we don't eat Chometz. That I'm not sure about, yeah, because consistently, you either don't eat either or you should eat both to elevate them. Maybe the idea of the Chometz is not per se it's evil. The problem is the fact that it's mixed together and causes confusion is the evil itself. Whereas Maror, that's something which, like we said, the Satan, the Satan, is essentially a good being. He's doing exactly what God wants him to do. It's God's messenger to tempt people in order to give them free will. Yeah, so taking the Maror itself, as long as we don't associate the Zoma with who we are, that we become the evil, which means we've failed, so we don't eat the Chometz, but to acknowledge there is such a concept as evil for a good purpose, then we can. Okay. Now we've got, this is amazing, right? The Korbon Peh Sach, right? So at the time of the temple, we used to eat the Peh Sach, Matzoh, and Maror together. Peh Sach is the Pascal lamb, Matzoh the unleavened bread, and the Maror is the bitter herbs. What was the Korbon Peh Sach? The Korbon Peh Sach represents the fifth level, the highest level of the 5. Right? That's the idea of the world to come. That's the idea of it says that in the end of the 36th chapter of Yechezkel, of Ezekiel, the Jewish people are called soin, right? They're called sheep, right? So the idea of sheep is the idea of the Jewish people in their totality as one being. As the rabbis describe that verse, they say why we call the sheep in that context, because the sheep, just like if it hurts one part of its body, the rest of the body suffers as well. Just like if we hurt our hand, then the whole body's hurting, right? So therefore we're called soin as well, because when one Jew suffers, the whole nation feels it as well. That's the idea, because we're a very unified type of nation, right? But on the deeper level, it means the reality, not just the fact that we feel for someone else in the Jewish people when they're suffering, is that on the higher and the deeper level, we are one entity. We're just a big entity. We're a big Jewish soul, which has got lots of bodies in the physical world. But ultimately, the soul of the Jewish people is one big soul. It's the soul of Adam, actually, right? So that's why the primary people who are meant to fix the sin of Adam is Adam himself, which is the Jewish people. Okay, the 100,000 souls are basically sparks of Adam's soul, which got split up into 600,000 parts. The non-Jews represent something else. That's more the external aspects of Adam, or you could say the clothes of Adam, right? Or the physical aspect of Adam, right? As opposed to the soul. They're both necessary, but they've got completely different jobs, as we've spoken about many times. So the idea of the Korbon Pesach is the idea of the fifth level of total completion in the world to come. Okay, in fact, in that very verse, which was brought from Ezekiel, I will call you. Let's actually bring it up quickly. Here we go. Ezekiel chapter. Let's bring the Rashi for those who like to have a quick look at the Rashi as we're going along. It's one of the. I think it's one of the. It's talking about the future. It's going to happen around the time where Hashem redeems the Jewish people, right? And the non-Jews blaspheming God's names and subjugating the Jewish people, right? And he says God's going to save us, but not for your sake. I'm going to save it for my sake, for the sanctity of my name, right? And I'll make within you a new heart, etc. Beautiful chapter, right? We actually read this on Parshas Porah every year. So it says here, right at the end, the last two verses, Komer Hashem Elokim, so says Hashem, Oid, further, Zois, this, Idoresh Lebeis Israel, I will search out for the sake of the Jewish people, or for the Jewish people, La'asos Lahom, to do this to them. Arbe Oisom, I will increase them, Katsoin, like a flock, Odom, man, right? Katsoin Odom. So you can either read it, I will increase them like Tsoin, like a flock, Odom, people, or Katsoin Odom, like Adam, right? The translation of Adam here is men like. I might apply them, the men like, the men, the men like a flock of sheep. Right, Arbe Oisom, Odom, I will increase them, that means the man, the nation, Katzon, like a flock. It's interesting, so you see the idea of Tzoin and Odom, man. And we see this is a reference to the Jewish people, right? And what does it mean, Arbe Oisom? The men like sheep. There'll be so many, because the basic meaning of this verse is I will increase them, the men of this nation like Tzon, like sheep. I'll make them very very great in number, right? Like the flock of the holy offerings, like the flocks of Jerusalem at the time of the festivals. The Jewish these empty cities, these desolate cities will then be full of Tzon Odom, flocks of men, literally flocks of men. There'd be so many people basically. And then they will know that I am God. And you have a look at the Rashi here. Right? They will be like the sheep which come to Jerusalem on the times of the Passover. Okay, very interesting. So you see, like a real allusion to Pesach here. Very interesting. So anyway, so you see that this verse refers to, first of all, the Jewish people as sheep, right? And it's referring to the Jewish people in the future, where we'll all gather together to bring the Korbon Pesach, the sacrifice of the Pesach, Pascal lamb in Jerusalem, and we're described as Adam, because we've reached that level of Adam. That's Adam again. Instead of being hundreds and thousands of parts of Adam, all the parts will be gelled back together and reconnected to become Adam once more. The Jewish people become Adam, right? His soul, anyway. So that is the idea of the Korbon Pesach. The Korbon Pesach essentially is a reference to the stage of completion of mankind, right? Represented primarily by the Jewish people becoming one, right? And just like we in the world to come are called a flock and Adam, right? So here, sown as well, sheep. This is what this sheep represents. Okay. Now, some very interesting laws of the Korbon Pesach. Where do you be able to see this idea? Where do you see that we've gone up to the level of Zulosoi, that being just outside of God's presence, which is the final destination of mankind. You've got God and you've got man, and they gradually come closer, right? So one rule is you must not break the bones of the Korbon Pesach. Why can't you break them? Right? No other sacrifice is a prohibition to break the bones, as far as I know. But definitely the breaking bones is specific to the Korbon Pesach. Why? Because since the Korbon Pesach represents this state of perfection of the world to come, we've already gone through the 4 levels by avoiding Chometz, right? By having the Maror, by having Matzoh that unifies the two together, right? And you have to eat the Matzoh and Maror with the Korbon Pesach, right? And that's the idea of the world to come, the third of the 7 dimensions. It's perfection, so you can't break a bone. Don't break any bones, because breaking bones means there's something wrong. There's something not complete, right? You have to eat the whole animal. Amazing, right? Every single bit has to be eaten. Why? Because the ultimate purpose of creation, the final state, is being totally connected with God. So therefore the pleasure we get in the world to come is total. Yeah, it's maximum. So therefore when we have the pleasure of eating the delicious roast lamb, as the Pascal lamb is, it has to be all eaten. There can't be even a bit left behind. That means that mankind has to all be there. There can't be a few people who didn't make it, right? Because God's plan is perfect, right? So nothing can be missing in the end. So therefore, the Korbon Pesach can't be lacking anything, right? It can't be broken because no imperfection allowed. And there's a shleimus, there's a perfection there. Also, we see a very striking aspect of the Korbon Pesach is the idea of unity, right? It says in that chapter 12 there in Exodus, just read through the chapter, you'll see it there, especially the first few verses. On the Shakatur, so Kol Kadas Israel ben Nabayim, yeah? They should slaughter it, who? All the congregation of the gathering of the Jewish people, right, in the afternoon of the Erev Pesach, just before Pesach comes in, the night of the 15th. All the Jewish people have to do it together, right? And then it has to be eaten in one house. Each family's Korbon has to be eaten together. That's why we've got our Seder night where the whole family is together. And those rules apply today to the Afikomen. You can't eat the Afikomen here and then finish the Afikomen, the Matzoh, which which is in place of the Korbon Pesach. Yeah, you can't eat it in one room and then finish it off in another room. It all has to be together. You start it together, that's your group, stay together now. Right? In fact, we see the other allusions to the idea of unity, the group, different groups, families, communities. We got the Jewish people in the temple, right? They all slaughtered the Pesachim, the Pascal offerings, together. There were huge groups, right? And it speaks about how it was so squashy there, you could just about get people in, right? Into the temple courtyard where they did the slaughtering. There was nothing like it. Usually, in the rest of the year, you got someone comes in, they do their sacrifice, they go out, another person came in. Right here, everyone's doing it together. It's a sense of complete being one with the crowd, so to speak. Right? The rabbis say that all of the Jewish people can be yoytze b'Pesach echad. That technically there can be, if it was possible to have enough meat for everyone, but theoretically there is a concept that you can have one Korbon Pesach for everyone. There's the ultimate expression of this idea of the unity of the Jewish people. That when it comes to the Korbon Pesach, we are one, right? Just practically you can't, because you don't get a sheep that big, right? So each one has to do their best to be a group. Do it in your family at least, or with your neighbors, right? We also learn from the Korbon Pesach, this is one of the sources of the rule, Shlucha shel Adam Kamoisoi. A messenger of a person is like himself. If I appoint you to be a messenger on my behalf, right? I think we spoke about this in the Sukkos lecture, about the idea of a messenger, right? I can give you my power and then you do it on my behalf, right? That means we don't need lots of individuals slaughtering the Korbon Pesach. We can have one person who slaughters for everyone, right? Even if it's more than one sheep, but one person can do the slaughtering for everyone. What's the idea? It's because in the world to come, which, as we said, the Korbon Pesach represents, the whole of mankind, right? Let's focus on the Jewish people, because the rest of mankind is an extension of that, right? The whole of the Jewish people are together. They're a total oneness, right? Because there's no individuals anymore. It's all the individuals. Obviously, everyone retains their own individual self to an extent, right? But we really, it's sort of like emerging, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. We've got all the pieces are there, but you're really looking at the whole picture, right? So the world to come is the idea of just man in its totality with God. So the more unified you can be for the Korbon Pesach, the better, the more similar it is to the world to come. Beautiful. And you mustn't have any Chometz at the time of the Pesach. You've got to make sure, besides the prohibition of owning Chometz, leaven, over the Passover festival, there's specific prohibition not to have it in your property at the time where you're having the Korbon Pesach. What's that like? It's like, imagine a person, there's a saying, there's a person's tovel v'sheretz b'yodo, a person who touches an impure animal, right, and he has to go into a mikveh, he has to immerse himself in a ritual mikveh, is like a pool of water, fulfilling certain halachic requirements. And he goes in there, dunks himself down, and comes out to be pure, but he's still holding on to the impure animal, right? What's the point of it? Totally, you've got to get rid of it first. So if a person would theoretically have Chometz in his house, that means he's still attached to this idea of the seventh level, where evil can be part of the equation, not just something to tempt people and then to reject. Oh, so you're actually having part of you're actually acknowledging that evil can still be part of the human condition. That's level 7. That's Adam after the sin. You can't do that, right? And you try doing that with the Korbon Pesach when you're meant to be in the world to come. This is precisely what God said to Adam, right, when he threw him out of the land of the Garden of Eden. What did he say to him? Oh dear, he ate from the tree of knowledge. Now let's send him out, he said to the angels who were going to do that mission for him, right? Lest he eat from the tree of life and live forever. What's the problem with that? Because if he lives forever, that's the tree of life, but he's still got this impurity inside him now, he's going to be in a state of imperfection forever. And that will refute the whole purpose of creation, which is that man should be in a perfected state. Where is it? 100% giver, if you want to use those terms. He's not 100% giver because he caused damage to himself, to his body. He brought his body down. And now to live forever, to be in the world to come, next to God, with that impurity, that's the most biggest pain possible. That's absolute shame. He's going to have to stand there in front of God forever, knowing I failed and I didn't fix it. Right? So that's why get him out before he eats from the tree of life. Once he's fixed himself, then he can have the tree of life afterwards. That's what's to come after the rectification of the sin of Adam. Right? Okay. So that's so therefore, if a person tries to go to the world to come, i.e. the Korbon Pesach, eating from the Pascal lamb, but he's still got Chometz, that's like he's still got his impurities and he's going to the world to come. It doesn't work. Okay. Right. Similarly, there's another rule. You can't eat it after sunrise. That means you can only eat it at the time where God passed through Egypt, which is at midnight or until midnight or until at least until the morning, right? Because the only time we can in this world connect with this reality is at that time where God actually revealed himself openly as the only power at the smiting of the firstborns. Only the night of Makas Bechoros, where we actually experience this reality. But afterwards, if you try to eat the Korbon Pesach and experience the reality of the world to come by eating the Korbon at a time where God's not revealing, because he took that revelation away in the morning, yeah, it would be like a person trying to go to the world to come, but he's not ready. Yeah, you're not on that level. Yeah, so either having Chometz means you're not ready, or you missed the boat. You had a small window where you can experience the totality of the world to come, on whatever level that means, by eating the sacrifice at the time where every year we get this revelation of God is the all-powerful one, right? But you miss that window. You're trying to eat and experience the world to come, which is represented by the eating of the Pascal lamb, at a time where God isn't revealing this reality. It's like you're trying to go to the world to come, and you're not on that level. So again, that's why you can't eat it after sunrise, and that's why if a person does eat after sunrise, he's chayav koros, because he's cutting himself off. You're absolutely destroying your connection with God, right? By trying to connect with him in an unfit state. If you do that, then you're just destroying yourself. Yeah, God's holiness will just overpower your imperfect state. You have to be similar to God to be close to him. We see the idea of being rushed out of Egypt, the idea of rushing, of doing things fast. Yeah, God hurried us out of Egypt, right? When Pharaoh came, when he saw his son died at Makas Bechoros, right? He rushed out. He said, "Where's Moshe and Aaron? Where are you, Moses and Aaron? Quick, get your people out now! Go! I'm not waiting anymore." Right? He said, "Well, we'll wait till morning." Yeah, but then in the morning, they were being rushed out, right? And they were rushing out so quickly, right, that they didn't let the dough rise. That's one of the reasons given why we have matzahs, because when they went out of Egypt, they had the dough. This is chapter 12 again, I think. No, this must be chapter 13, surely. No, it's chapter 12. It's still in chapter 12. It's quite a very long chapter, chapter 12. Right. Oh, yes, it goes there and then it carries on, yeah. Right, so what was it saying? Yeah, the Jewish people being rushed out, and the dough which they're carrying on their back, right, didn't have time to rise. So they had to bake it. It was matzah, basically, right, more or less. Discussion about whether it was actually kosher matzah, because maybe it didn't got baked by the sun or whatever, right, which doesn't count. Anyway, so the idea of on Pesach we're rushing out of Egypt. We see if you go to a matzah bakery, right, where they're actually baking the matzahs, you see people moving quickly. Don't let it rise. Keep working. Quick. Your turn, right? You do the holes in the matzah now. Go quick. Bring it to the oven. Quick. Next person, add the water. Bring it to the person who's rolling. The whole thing is full of energy, right? In fact, the Arizal says that the sweat which you exude through all the hard work making the matzahs is actually a rectification for the Aveira, for the sin of seminal emission in inappropriate way, basically. That's part of the sin of Adam. It brings down there, and that's why the Jewish people were enslaved. It's a lot to do with that sin which Adam had. 130 years he was without a wife. Yeah, that's a discussion that Arizal speaks about that, and basically there's a rectification for that. It makes sense, rectifying the sin of Adam, or the consequences of the sin of Adam caused other sins, right? So the idea was rezus, urgency, right? And I didn't mention this in the sin of Adam lectures. So there's another explanation which I'll quickly throw in now. Rabbi Avigdor Miller, he says the sin of Adam was laziness. Right, interesting. Right, you have to work out how you get that, but I think the idea was he should have got on with maybe eating from the tree of life straight away, right? Or maybe he didn't energize himself in order to fight against the Satan. Maybe, okay, I'm not sure. I can't remember his rationale about it, but anyway, it does fit in nicely here. The idea of Zerizus is a rectification for the Zerizus, I should say, is alacrity and doing things with urgency and with intensity, and not just doing it casually, basically. So you see that the idea of the Zerizus of alacrity here, of baking the matzahs in the temple when they had the Korbon Peh Sach, it was absolutely, according to the descriptions in the Talmud, it was a sight to see. They basically, I think one calculation works out, is about 6 to 10 seconds or something for every sacrifice. It was so fast. Yeah, they slaughtered. I remember slaughtering, you have to be very careful not to rush it. They were fast, but they were precise. Slaughtered it, catch the blood, bring it to the pass the blood on to the next person, who passes to the next person, and then eventually pour it on the base of the altar, right? And then you pass them back. So you see, it was just like a flash of silver and gold bowls going backwards and forwards, slaughtering the next person, and bringing the things on the. It was buzzing, right? Right, as we said, there was so much going on in these the groups, the three groups where they slaughtered the Pesach. It was just buzzing the whole time. What's the idea of all this energy, right? Right, is we're trying to get out of time, right? We're trying to transcend time, right? We make the Korbon Pesach, right? It's meant to be the world to come, right? The Korbon Pesach. So go do it quickly. Because the world to come is constant movement. Like we said before, you're one level of infinitely close to God, but then you get even closer, even infinitely more close than the previous infinite. So you're going in levels of infinity. So that's very fast. Infinitely fast is pretty fast, right? That's the idea of the Korbon Pesach being done with such alacrity and speed. And what do? You eat it with the Matzoh and the Maror of the Korbon Pesach. Because remember, the point is not to ignore the lower levels, right? Yeah, the idea is you're meant to transform the lower levels to the level of the world to come, right? Of the Pesach. So with the Pesach, you have to have Matzoh, which represents the physical and spiritual. Maror, which represents the sixth level of the Satan, the Satan of the world of Zuhamah, and you eat it with it to enhance the Korbon Pesach. And that's the idea of Gilu Yichud, like the third lecture of the Keystone Lectures, is that the evil itself is being used to enhance and to reveal a new aspect of God's power. Right? What else do we have? We have about 8 things so far. Right, there's 2 more things. Right, I'll see the best till last. Wow, it's beautiful, that one. Okay. Number 9, not eating after the afikomen, right? There's a rule which we have on Seder night. The last thing we eat is the last big piece of matzah, and in the time of the temple, it would be for afters. We would have the Korbon Pesach. We'd have the lamb for afters. Only once you have a feeling of satisfaction, right? So that's the idea of. You can only access the world to come once everything's complete. Once you have a feeling of completion, then you start enjoying the world to come. Once you've sorted out all the problems, you've fixed all the damage done by Adam's sin and by the intrinsic potential for evil in the physical world, and you've elevated the world to the spiritual world, right? So you've done your job now. Now you can enjoy the true reward for your action, which is represented by the Korbon Pesach. That's why you only eat it right at the end. Don't have anything after the Korbon Pesach, because if you eat something after the Korbon Pesach, you're basically saying, well, there's a world to come, but then maybe we'll go back to the previous level for a piece of cake. No, that's not how it works. Once you're in the world to come, that is the epitome of pleasure. That is how we were created. That's how we're wired, to appreciate that. Solely to appreciate that, the closeness to God. That's how we're wired. So therefore there's nothing after the afikomen. Once you've eaten the afikomen, the last piece of matzah on the Seder night, or the Korbon Pesach, which afikomen is meant to represent, because we have 2 matzahs on the night of Seder, right? One to represent, one for the matzah which they had at the time of the temple, and one to represent unfortunately we don't have the Pascal lamb anymore, because the temple's not here. So the matzah is done in its place. So the idea of having the matzah at the end represents the idea of the Korbon Pesach at the end. That's a final destination, a final point of mankind, right? And there's nothing after it, right? Enjoy that. You've got to enjoy it, right? Eat it all up. Don't break bones. And finally, there's a beautiful idea which Rabbi Kessin said. How do you make the Korbon Pesach? There's many ways you can cook a piece of lamb. You can boil it, broil it, you can roast it, you can casserole it, yeah? The law is very specific. And if you look at in the Talmud and the Mishnah and the Keter Tzol in the seventh chapter in Tractate Pesachim, which speaks about the laws of Pesach, it describes how they actually cook the Pesach. Right, and it's explicit in the verses in beginning of chapter 12 in Exodus as well. You have to roast it directly on the fire, and there can't be anything which feeds into the heat besides the fire itself. So, for example, a spit. So you have to roast on a spit. The spit can't be metal, because the metal spit itself will heat up, and part of the lamb will get cooked on the inside, but not through the fire directly, only through a secondary sort of conduit, the metal being heated up on the inside. So you have to use a certain type of wood spit which doesn't heat up. Everything has to be in direct contact with the fire. What's that? Let's see if we can work that out. It's because in the world to come, God's spiritual energy that's compared to a fire. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, right? God describes himself as a consuming fire, right? The idea of fire is the idea when fire takes hold of something, then all you're left is with fire. The idea of fire is the negation of anything except the fire. Okay? Or the fire of the burning bush, for example. We see that God revealed himself in the burning bush as a fire there, or through the desert. His divine presence was in the form of a fire at night time anyway. So the world to come, right, it's going to be God's heat, so to speak, or his light, coming directly in contact with us without any barrier, because we're going to be on such a high level there. We're going to be so similar to God, so we can be as close as we so to speak, as close as we want, for a better term, right? There won't be any need for having barriers between us and God anymore, right? Because we've done all the work, we've become perfected to this extremely high level of perfection. We are very similar to God, right? So God can be so close to us, right? Now, if you don't cook the Korbon Pesach, roast it with fire, and you cook it with water, that implies, well, the fire can't come in contact with the meat. The fire can't contact with the water, the pan, the water into the lamb itself. Yeah? That's how God relates to us now, right? Through many different filters, right? God doesn't just like wake up in the morning and then we're just like blasted away with the infiniteness of only God. That's not how it works. We wouldn't be able to handle it. We're not on that level yet, right? But Pesach is the time where we resonate with that reality. So therefore, we have the Korbon Pesach. We taste the Korbon Pesach, which is a foreshadowing of that world to come. So therefore, just like there, the contact between us and God is direct, right? We are the Korbon Pesach in this analogy. Like we said, Ketzonot and the Jewish people are the flock, the man, right? So therefore, when we make our Korbon Pesach here, the fire has to be absolutely direct contact with the meat in its totality. There can't be a single part of the lamb which is cooked by any other source, or which doesn't have the full force of the fire on it. Amazing, beautiful idea from Rabbi Kessing there. I think this is his idea, to be honest, most of this. Right. Based on traditional sources, obviously, but he's extrapolating a lot of the ideas. And this is the idea of the Korbon Pesach. It's a total process of the rectification or the tikkun of creation until its ultimate destination. That's what Pesach's about, and we experienced all those levels on Pesach. So therefore, Pesach means jumping, right? Because we experience that jumping from level 7 to 6 to 5, 4, and to 3, right? We experienced it actually. The only time in human history mankind's ever experienced what it's like to be in the world to come, right? And the mitzvahs, the commandments we have on Pesach are meant to mirror that and give us a sort of a weaker form of that connection to the reality of Pesach. Okay? Beautiful. Right. And that's why if a person doesn't do the Korbon Pesach, it's Kores, because you're cutting yourself literally from the world to come. The Korbon Pesach is your experience of the world to come in this world. If you don't have it, so you're saying, oh, I'm not doing that commandment which lets me experience the world to come. So therefore you don't get the world to come. Kores, cut off. God forbid, right? Obviously, there's ways of fixing that as well. It's very hard, though, right? So it's an extreme damage which a person's done if they don't have the Korbon Pesach. So no vegetarians in the world to come. Sorry, everyone. All the vegetarians out there. Once a year, you're going to have to eat some meat. So, right. So that's the idea of Pesach. Pesach being the beginning of all the festivals, personifies the whole journey of mankind that God has for creation. All the mitzvahs we've seen, we've gone through basically all the commandments to do with Pesach, almost all of them, right? A few we left out, but and we see they're all connected with this idea of either unifying the lower levels of imperfection or impurity with the high levels of spirituality, and then or it means actually experiencing the world to come itself in the form of the Korbon, the sacrifice of the Pascal lamb itself. And finishing off, it says, just as we experienced it in the past, remember, it's a cycle, it's happening every year. So just as we experienced that reality, that flash, we jumped up to that level and we experienced that flash of experience of the world to come, just for that night. In the past, that's happening every year. Might not be so pronounced, but there's something there. But in the future, again, when we come to this time of the year, we'll experience it again eventually in the final redemption, which is also meant to be on Peh Sach, right? Which is going to be the beginning of the transformation process. But this time, it's not going to be a temporary thing where they're going to serve a golden calf afterwards, right? The final time it happens, that will be the final time, right? And the final stage before the beginning of the process of transforming the worlds literally to the world to come, which is Olam Haba, as the rabbis say. They bring from the verse in Micah, chapter 7, verse 15, just like the time when you came out of Egypt, I will show you miracles in the future. That means the Jewish people, Nissan Nigalu, Nissan Asid in the Goyal. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah 11 says, I think 10, 11. In Nissan, that's this month we're in now, where Passover is, the Jewish people were redeemed originally, and they will be redeemed in the month of Nissan in the future. So, hopefully it'll be this year. We're looking at America and Israel looking to attack Iran. If you remember the Armageddon lecture, that is exactly what we're waiting for, a big conflict between America and Iran. So if it happens this year, well, that's good, I guess, right? It's a bit scary, of course. Remember, the whole world's going to be trembling when Iran or Persia does its thing. So I'm predicting they will actually send a nuclear missile, and the whole world will be terrified of nuclear, all-out nuclear war. Maybe there will be. Hope not. But yeah, but the timing seems good. But we can't predict these things. We can only hope, and hope that we're part of those who merit to come out the other side, and then and have the privilege of witnessing the amazing revelation of God in the world, right? When the whole world will start to get transformed, right? Again, just as we did in Pesach, so too may it be in this year as well. Thank you for listening, everyone, and all the best. And again, happy birthday again to my father. Okay, have a kosher Pesach, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.